Warning, the following content may be triggering to some people, especially those who are or have been victims of childhood sexual exploitation and/or assault.
All right. Well, hopefully that's in frame. Welcome back, everyone. So I hope everyone understood the last video what I was saying. I'm not condemning non-binaries. I was saying in that everyone is non-binary, and everyone exists on a spectrum between masculinity and femininity. And so, to my surprise, it's like when I first heard about non-binary, because nobody had explained to me that they were talking about not even like secondary sex traits or anything. Like that no one told me that they were talking about masculine and feminine behaviors within society, which, I mean, I would just automatically say, well, those are social constructs. So to me, the first time hearing about non-binary anything, it was like, it's almost the equivalent of somebody coming up to you and saying that there's more than two biological sexes, that there's male and female. So there's a penis and a pair of testicles and then a vagina. And then there are these people out there thinking or saying, believing that they had something else. And it's like, okay, what is it? What does it look like? What's its reproduction purposes, that kind of thing. So now that it's been explained that there is a separation or distinction between biological and perceived, like, gender, like how you present in society on a spectrum between masculine and feminine, I would say, well, those are all mostly social constructs, and everybody has masculine and feminine traits. So imagine what that sounded like to me when I first heard it, somebody telling me. Like, no, there's more than two biological sexes. That's a weird concept. So I'm keeping those videos up because if there's anyone out there that thinks that they have something beyond a penis and vagina between their legs, then you would have to explain that to me. You're going to have to tell me what it is, strictly for, like the purpose of knowledge, not to expose yourself, not for sex or anything like that. It's just that in the human species, I've never seen anything other than a penis, testicles, or vagina. So, yeah. Anyway, I am really excited. I've just got these books in the mail. They were given to me as a Christmas present by my partner. I've got this one, the Victorian Book of the Dead. I can't wait to start reading this. It's about the different ways that they looked at death. They looked at death in the Victorian age a lot differently than we do today. The process of mourning and grieving was actually like it had a lot more uh, social impact. Like there were stores dedicated to it. There was actually like different things that you were supposed to do depending on what month, what day. So that there was actually a cultural aspect of different attire, different things you were supposed to wear, different things you were supposed to do. Death was very, very real for them in that time frame, and in as well in the 1800s and 1700s. You still had morticians, but death was dealt with inside the family, inside the household itself. And this is another wonderful book. Is called Beyond the Dark Veil, and it's got all these posts. This is the children's, but these are post-mortem daguerreotypes and tintypes and other stuff. So we got tons of different things about this day and the day and age that they did this. It was absolutely seen as an expression of art to do this, was to take pictures of the dead. I did not know that they did post-mortem daguerreotypes of pets, because they have a section for pets in this. And that must have been extraordinarily expensive, because back then, post-mortem daguerreotypes, yeah, here's the pets. These were really expensive. Most people did not do photography back when it was on tintype and daguerreotype. Most people couldn't afford to do it. It was very expensive. And then I've also got this one, Sleeping Beauty. It's another book about post-mortem daguerreotypes. I actually had the first edition of this, the just entitled Sleeping Beauty. It was, bigger book, and it had a lot of, interesting information about the grieving and mourning process of the Victorian age up to through the 1800s and into the early 1900s, and the art style of taking pictures of the dead. So I'm really excited about those. I can't wait to start reading them. And yeah, so on to the topic of this video. Somebody actually told me once that they downvoted or disliked my video because I vaped unironically. I'm a consumer of nicotine. I really like my nicotine, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm going to vape while I do anything, pretty much. So get over it. I used to smoke. I smoked for 20 years until I vaped for 2 days, and then started vaping. I vaped for 2 days. I lit up a cigarette, took 2 drags off of it, put it out, and said, I guess I'm vaping now, because cigarettes tasted really bad and smelled really bad after vaping for 2 days. And then there's some health benefits I got back from vaping. After vaping for about a month, my lungs started clearing up and stuff. So, all right. So this person made a comment on one of my videos, my anti-map videos, my anti-pedophile videos back in the day, and they told me that the information I used in the video was antiquated, that they no longer consider pedophilia in the DSM that as a mental illness. They consider it a sexuality. And they told me to look at their playlist. So I hadn't looked at their playlist. I hadn't skimmed through the videos really, but I have a feeling, and this is the case a lot of the times, is that people who try to promote or try to get pedophilia out there as something that should be normalized or something that we should be sympathetic to, oftentimes cherry pick through the data to get confirmation bias. The real reality is I don't care if you want to consider it a sexuality. That doesn't change the fact that children are not sexually ready, and it causes psychological damage. It causes medical issues. And actually, that was one of the subjects in that video that this person commented on. is that it caused irreparable psychological damage, as well as physical damage. And there are medical reports about that out there, beyond STDs, okay, mind you. And I mean, somebody said that this was an appeal to nature fallacy. Okay, appealing to nature is, for one, is not a fallacy. It's just pointing it out that this doesn't exist in nature. Okay, I raised and bred guinea pigs, and a guinea pig, like a fucking rodent, doesn't even participate in that kind of activity. A male guinea pig is not interested in mating with a female unless she is sexually ready to reproduce. So even in a rodent, you don't see that kind of behavior. And bonobo chimps, our closest living relative to Homo sapiens, do not engage in sexual activity with other bonobo chimps that are not sexually ready to reproduce. Another tactic or strategy that a lot of these people will use is they take it to a gray area. They go to the area of what's called hebephilia. They start bringing up aspects like a 22-year-old having a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old. In many states, 17 is still not the legal age of 17 or 16 is still not considered the legal age of consent. Although a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old are, they're post-pubescent. They know what sex is. They know they want to have it. And I mean, my dad was 21, 22 when he married my mom, and she was 17. They had sex, thus I am here. It wasn't illegal. He had permission from the parents. The courts had no issue with it. That's what you call a gray area. So that they take it to that gray area because they know that the hebephilia is a gray area. They know that when you talk about 16 and 17-year-olds, like in that sort of bracket, we're talking about teenagers that are aware of sex and that do want to have sex. And that makes it a really gray area. But that doesn't include, that shouldn't include, that gray area should not include prepubescent people. Like you can't talk about a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old dating somebody who's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and then turn around and then say that, like in the same breath, talk about a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, and if you go anywhere below that, then it's just like, what the fuck? But it's already what the fuck at 9, 10 years old. That's just a completely different story. Now, some people might have really strong feelings about somebody who's 16 or 17 dating 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And then it just gets even worse the further you get up. The stronger the feelings become. But it doesn't really matter to me if, and probably to the majority of people, and I don't think this is something that is a partisan issue in politics. I'm pretty sure for the most part, the left and the right are still the majority of the population is going to agree on this, is that you can call it a sexuality if you want. That doesn't excuse or mean that we should be normalizing or accepting that it's okay for a sexually mature adult to be interacting with a person, with a child, with somebody who is prepubescent. That's not acceptable. And if you are somebody who is a pedophile, who is attracted to children, because in psychology, I can tell you that in the criminology and the psychological reports, even back when I made that video, they do say that it doesn't seem to be something that can be, like curable or fixed. You can chemically castrate somebody and who is a pedophile. Actually, if they participate in victimizing children, they will find other ways of victimizing or of penetrating their victims. And the thing that's really like interesting about this, when you talk about something like rape, a lot of the times people forget rape is an act of violence. It's not a sexual act. And a lot of the times with these people, especially the people who act on their pedophilic, on their desires, they tend to go in a direction where they want to dominate or control somebody who is weaker than them. And a lot of the times in the world of pedophiles, you will also find bestiality, and that's really common. Again, the ability to dominate and control somebody or something weaker than themselves. It's a sort of power dynamic. It's not about sex. It's about exuding violence, about dominancy and control over somebody or something weaker than themselves. And that's very common. And that's why when we see somebody who is a sex offender and has participated in child exploitation, child sexual exploitation, if we chemically castrate them, they're not horny anymore, but they find other ways to, I don't want to say victimize their victims. That's too much, but that's essentially what they're doing. Is they find other ways of assaulting. That's a good way of assaulting their victims. Now, if you are a person who is attracted to minors, like if you are a pedophile, and that's something I find that is interesting in criminology studies. That's interesting about pedophilia is they don't seem to be particularly interested in the gender. They're more interested in the age bracket than they are in the actual gender or sex of that person. My hand is shaky because my nerves are still turning back on from the surgery, nerve compression for 5 years. So, but yeah, that still stands true in the psychological community. What I said in that video back then about the medical and psychological view of pedophilia or minor attracted persons, that still stands true. And I don't, even if the psychological community decides to call it a sexuality, that doesn't mean that it's normalized. It doesn't mean that it's okay. And the people out there, the pedophiles that are pushing this stuff, you guys got to realize that the mass, there's a particular mass percentage of the population that feels some type of way about you. And how do I put it, delicately for YouTube? They mean to do you great harm, whether you have acted on it or not. And see, I don't know that I can blame them, because any parent has every right to feel some type of way about it. And every person who is a victim of childhood sexual exploitation has every right to feel some type of way about it. They absolutely do. And the real reality is that most people have this sort of instinct, and it is an instinct, it is a biological trait that is a part of our psychological evolution. is that in our little communities, in our little tribes that we exist in, we have an instinctual responsibility to take care of the young, not just our own, but the children in our entire community, make sure that they're safe and well protected. And so that's why you see people that don't even have children, or people who are not victims of childhood sexual exploitation, still feel some type of way, because we're meant, we sort of have that hardwired in our brains that it's very important that we protect children above adults. It's pretty evident, actually. So I took a screen capture of this comment and this person's channel, and don't worry, I'll leave the link to this person's channel in the description below, so anyone can feel free to go and look at these videos themselves. But like I said, I have a feeling what I'm going to find is that a lot of the stuff they think that is coming from academia, they think it's saying that it's okay, or they think that it's what's the word, that it's advocating for them. In actuality, it's probably not. So I'll go ahead and roll that for you. So here's the comment that this person has made. This chronophilos. That's obsolete scientific data, though. Pedophilia is no longer considered a mental illness. Instead, it's considered a sexuality. Check my playlist for more information. You have this other person replying on another video that I did about this subject matter. They're making a comment about Shiwan head, calling her no brain in head. Oh, okay, that was real clever. So this is this person's uploads. Don't become a perpetrator, presented by Lime Films. I Pedophile 2016, presented by CBC. Here's their playlists. They got this thing about child sexual exploitation material, treat to prevent. They got, TED Talks has really gone downhill. They started doing this thing where these people who are coming from backgrounds of academia were giving up on their actual academic skills, because they would. It's actually really funny. There was a woman, the woman who did the whole fake it till you make it psychological stuff. Like, she was rejected after peer review because they couldn't get what she was saying to be, they couldn't get it to be replicated and reproduced. So she was academically rejected, but she was still going on all these TED Talks because she was making all this money. And that's what happens a lot with these TED Talks is you get somebody from academia, and they give up on their actual studies because they start making like just a shit ton of money, and they ignore where they were actually coming from. I don't want to play that. I want to see this list. Homosexuality. It's about survival, not sex. Why is this? What does this have to do with pedophilia? This is about. I've seen this TED Talk. I know what it's about. It has nothing to do with pedophilia at all. And then I haven't watched this, but I over the years TED Talks has become less and less credible over the years. A long time ago it was fairly credible, but over the years it's just gotten stupid. And we have one about the science behind sexuality. I mean, I guess I'll check these out at some point, but I have a feeling I'm not going to be shocked by what I find. And they got a documentary about pedophilia. I have a feeling a lot of this stuff is either cherry picked, or they're saying that it's academically approved, but it's probably not. It's kind of like there's a psychologist. Yeah, he's a psychologist. he's been peer reviewed and denied multiple times. And what's funny, I forget the psychologist's name, but he came up before when I was doing the anti-map stuff. He also came up when I was going like arguing against the neo Nazis. The neo Nazis were citing him as a source of sort of race realism, because apparently the psychologist was trying to say that white people were smarter than black people, which was academically reviewed and declined. And the same psychologist that did this wrote this book about, you know, this quote unquote race realism stuff. He also went on to make a book about pedophilia, and that was peer reviewed and declined by academia as well. So I have a feeling if I watch a lot of this stuff, I'm just probably not going to be surprised in that it's probably not saying what the person thinks it's saying, and it's probably like this. I see the psychology symbol here. I have a feeling this is cherry picked stuff that's not academically approved. Like it's not been peer reviewed by academia and approved. That happens a lot. I mean, this is the one thing about social media where social media gets really poisonous, is that you have this quite like this just absolute overabundant amount of just pure bullshit. I mean, a lot of these people are not educated, they don't have degrees, and they're sitting at home and they're making these videos, and people take it seriously. Um, so take that as I'll look over it, but I'm not making any promises that, you know, I'll watch it and be like, oh my gosh, that's really insightful and changes my perspective. I have a feeling it's not going to change my perspective. So after doing that, of going through doing that screen cap, I did peruse through some of those videos, and it's exactly as I thought. The one with the psychology, they don't want to change. They want to change the wording of child pornography to, because they think that calling it child pornography is doing an injustice to pornography, because they think that pornography is normalizing. And so what they want to call child pornography, instead of calling it child pornography, they want to call it child sexual exploitation videos, or child exploitation, or child sexual exploitation media, because they think that's more condemning, and they want it to be more condemning, because any time there is a picture or a video, that is a child's life that has been destroyed. So for people who are attracted to children, participating in media that has childhood sexual exploitation, that's not a way of dealing with your attraction. That's not healthy, because that's still a child whose life has been completely ruined. Psychologically, they're destroyed, and who knows what has happened, what kind of damage they have sustained to their body. And I went through the other videos. There was a lot of videos in there that seemed to be trying to get people to have sympathy or empathy towards people who are attracted to children. And I don't know why they expect that out of society. Like I said, if somebody is like, if somebody's saying that they're attracted to children, if they're saying that, and they're trying to go out and get help so that they don't engage in childhood sexual exploitative media, so that they don't go out and engage in child sexual exploitation physically themselves, they should that's absolutely what they should be doing. They should be going to they should be going to psychologists. They should be getting counseling. They should be getting therapy to make sure that they are staying away from children, staying away from child pornography, or child sexual exploitative media, they should be staying away from those things, because there's a victim involved in this, and you can't be doing that. There is no way, you have the right to do that to someone. You do not have the right to psychologically and physically damage another person. And especially when you're talking about children, like, people are extremely defensive over children. Like, I could show a video of two adults getting into a fist fight and people would laugh. People might view that as entertainment. If I show somebody, an adult, fist fighting with a child, that's that would be like, that video would probably go viral and be viewed as like an atrocity. So going through those videos, like I said, it seems like most of the content that is asking for some kind of empathy or sympathy or pity, it's an appeal to emotive force or an appeal to pity. Like these videos they're trying to make it like these people who are attracted to minors, they're victims of society because society is so mean to them. It's like, you have to understand, people are going to be very, very defensive because the act of childhood sexual exploitation is pretty volatile, and it causes a lot of damage to something that society sees as very, very important and needing of protection. And children do need protection. They do. They're weak. They don't know almost anything about the world that they're in. They have this sort of innocence where they don't know how much danger is out there. And so it's important for adults to protect them, to keep them from being exploited, from being abused, from being hurt. They don't know anything about this. So again, like the TED Talks video, she was actually saying, like, the media that's up online that shows childhood sexual exploitation is really bad and it's got to stop. She was not advocating for people who are attracted to minors. The psychologist that was saying we need to change the name, he wasn't saying that he wasn't saying that pedophilia wasn't a psychological disorder. He was saying that pedophilia, or that child pornography should be called child sexual exploitation material. That's what he was saying. He wasn't saying that pedophilia was a sexuality. None of them were saying that. They were absolutely behind the notion that pedophilia is a mental disorder. Like I said, this is not something that you find in any other species. This is something that only human beings do, and that's why we probably lean more towards it being a psychological disorder, is because, for one, we don't see it in other species, but two, there are aspects of many pedophiles that are more closely related to sociopaths. Believe it or not. You may not like that reality, but that is the truth, that pedophiles do have a lot in common with sociopathy. It's true. So no, these psychologists that this person's showing, they're not advocating for pedophilia. They're not saying that it's a sexuality. They're actually saying that calling it a sexuality or calling it pedophilia is normalizing it, and we should call it childhood sexual exploitation, because that's what it is. They're trying to make it more condemning and less socially and societally acceptable. But then again, you have the other video on there. There's another video that's like this guy that's like, I'm a Marine, I'm a weapons specialist, blah 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 blah, and no one would expect me that I'm attracted to children. And it's like the whole point and purpose of that is trying to get people to feel sorry for him. And it's like, why? What are we feeling sorry about? I mean, that person is a threat to any child. I mean, you could make the argument that he's not an acting pedophile. He's not actually going out and assaulting a child, but still, that threat is there, and that's concerning. Just because he's not active doesn't mean that he's not going to become active. And that's the concern, and people have every right to be concerned about that. I don't know why you wouldn't be concerned about that. I think that's normal. That's normal to be concerned if a sex offender, somebody who's actually committed the act of sexual exploitation on a child, if the community rally, especially with all the children that were living in that neighborhood, it's like, of course they're upset. Of course they want that person out of their town because they want their children to be safe. I would think that that's just common sense. So I mean, I don't buy into it, but I mean, if you wanna call pedophilia a sexuality, it doesn't change the fact that it's still, you're still talking about exploiting children in a sexual way. You're still talking about psychologically damaging a child, physically damaging a child. And for anyone who is attracted to prepubescent or children, prepubescent, or even the hebephilia. I have a problem with hebephilia even, but to anyone that is attracted to children, you need to go and get help. I mean, you need to do everything in your power to stay away from children. You need to stay away from child sexual exploitive media, and you need to stay away from the actual physical act of child sexual exploitation, of basically, it's not even basically, it's assault on a child. You can't do that. So you can call it a sexuality if you want. That doesn't change the fact that it's not okay. It's not acceptable, and it shouldn't be acceptable. And by any means, it's not going to be acceptable. Period. Even if you call it a sexuality, it doesn't matter. It's still not okay. Now, if we're trying to get society to the point of recognizing people who are attracted to minors, that if they are getting help, then that's a good thing, then okay, I mean, we can do that, but the thing is once we step into that lane, the moment people start engaging in the act and actually harming children, it's like society's just going to pull right back and say, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're not doing this whole, well, we're going to be accepting of people that are getting help, because the moment somebody steps out of line and assaults a child, the kid gloves come off. Sorry, no pun intended there. I mean, like, people are not going to be empathetic and sympathetic anymore. They're going to go back to making it to the way that it is, that people who are attracted to minors are a social pariah. And there's just nothing you can do about that. That's the way it is. And like I said, they have every right. I typically don't like doing videos about this anymore because I have friends, immediate friends, people around me, people involved in my life that are victims of childhood sexual exploitation, and they watch my content, and these videos really get to them. It hurts. They can't stand watching these pedophiles or these pro-pedophile people come and try and argue with me and try to say that it's okay, it's fine, as long as they're not committing the act, blah, 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 blah. They can't stand it. They can't. These people are victims of childhood sexual exploitation, and this content is really triggering for them. It's hard for them to watch when I make videos debunking the claims that come out of the pedophiles. And that's why psychologists are not normalizing this, is because there is a victim here. There's victims involved. It's really hard to call it a sexuality. But like I said, even if you call it a sexuality, it doesn't change the fact you can't assault a child. You can't. You don't have that right. Period. You don't have that right. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that. Support the idea of choices, not one's ability to impose their will on others against their own will, like pedophiles do, minor attracted people. And with that, I'm out.